Hi and welcome. Imagine a man who has everything. A billion-dollar empire, a glamorous fiancé, and a life of unimaginable luxury. Nathan Callahan was on top of the world, about to announce his engagement at the most lavish party of the year. He thought he had left his humble past far behind. But what happens when the caterer for his own engagement party turns out to be the woman who mysteriously vanished from his life 5 years ago? And she's not alone. Standing beside her are 2 small children, and they both have his eyes. His perfect world is about to shatter. The Callahan Manor, perched atop a cliff overlooking the tempestuous Atlantic, was a monument to new money, a sprawling Gothic beast of granite and glass that sneered at the old world estates dotting the coastline. Tonight it was ablaze with light, a beacon of opulence against the bruised twilight sky. Inside, the air hummed with the electric current of wealth and power. Men in bespoke suits, their faces smooth with success, conversed in hushed, confident tones, while women, draped in silks and dripping with diamonds, moved like exotic birds in a gilded cage. This was Nathan Callahan's world, a world he had meticulously built from the ashes of a life he'd long since buried. At 32, Nathan was the epitome of his own success story. With a jawline as sharp as his business acumen, and eyes the color of stormy seas, he commanded attention without demanding it. He moved through the throng of his engagement party with an easy grace, a predator at home in his jungle. On his arm was Isabel Morrow, a woman who seemed sculpted from ivory and ambition. Her family's name was a cornerstone of Parisian society. Her beauty a strategic asset, and their impending marriage a merger of empires. "Darling," Isabel murmured, her voice a silken caress against his ear, her crimson lips brushing his cheek. "Everyone is simply gushing about the new chef. You must tell me where you found her. The canapes are divine." Nathan offered a placid smile, his mind miles away, calculating the closing figures of his latest acquisition. A recommendation from a colleague. They said she was a hidden gem, a culinary artist. Apparently, she just opened a small exclusive catering business, Julia's Table, I believe it's called. The name meant nothing to him, just another detail outsourced to his capable assistant. The party was a well-oiled machine, every detail perfect, every moment choreographed. Yet, a strange restlessness gnawed at Nathan. He felt a phantom ache, a ghost of a memory he couldn't quite grasp. It had been there for years, a dull throb beneath the surface of his new life, a constant reminder of a time when his world was smaller, simpler, and infinitely more vibrant. A time before the betrayal that had set him on this relentless path to power. He shook his head, clearing the unwelcome fog. The past was a closed chapter, a book he had burned. Tonight was about the future, about cementing his legacy with Isabel, the perfect partner for the man he had become. "I think it's time," he said, his voice resonating with the quiet authority that made markets tremble. He squeezed Isabel's hand, leading her towards the grand staircase where his announcement would be made. But first, he wanted a word with this new chef. It was a whim, a sudden urge to see the artist behind the masterpiece canopies that had so impressed his discerning guests. He excused himself from Isabel, promising to return in a moment, and made his way towards the kitchens, a domain he rarely entered. The polished marble floors of the guest areas gave way to practical steel and tile. The air grew thick with the savory sense of roasting herbs and simmering reductions. The calm, orchestrated hum of the party was replaced by the clatter of pans and the urgent low voices of the kitchen staff. He spotted a woman with her back to him, her movements precise and fluid as she plaited a delicate arrangement of seared scallops. Her hair, a cascade of rich, dark chocolate waves, was loosely tied, a few rebellious strands clinging to the nape of her neck. There was something familiar in the way she stood. In the slight unconscious tilt of her head, a jolt, sharp and unwelcome, shot through him. "The food is exceptional," Nathan said, his voice smoother than he felt. "My guests are very impressed." The woman stiffened. For a long moment, she didn't move, her hands hovering over the plate. Then slowly she turned. The world tilted on its axis. The roar of the party, the clatter of the kitchen, it all faded into a deafening silence. It was her. Julia, his Julia, the woman who had been his everything, the one who had shattered his heart and vanished without a trace. 5 years ago. She was different, yet achingly the same. The fire in her emerald eyes was banked, replaced by a guarded weariness. New lines of exhaustion were etched faintly around her mouth, a mouth he had once kissed with a desperate, all-consuming passion. She wore a simple chef's uniform, a stark contrast to the designer gowns that adorned the women in the next room. Yet she wore it with a dignity that outshone them all. Nathan's carefully constructed composure crumbled. The billionaire CEO, replaced by the boy from the wrong side of the tracks who had loved a girl with stars in her eyes. Julia, he breathed, the name a ghost on his lips. Her own face was a mask of shock, her skin paling beneath its sun-kissed hue. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice fragile, as if the single word might break her. A million questions screamed in his mind. Where had she been? Why had she left? The pain of her abandonment, a wound he thought had scarred over, ripped open, raw and bleeding. But before he could utter a single one, a small voice piped up from near her feet. "Mommy, is the man going to eat all the shrimp? Noah is still hungry." Nathan's gaze dropped. Peeking out from behind Julia's legs was a small boy, no older than 4, with a mop of unruly dark hair and eyes the exact shade of a stormy sea. His eyes beside him, clutching Julia's other leg, was a little girl, a miniature version of her mother. But with the same stubborn set to her jaw that Nathan saw in the mirror every morning, the air left his lungs in a painful rush. The math was simple, brutal, and undeniable. 5 years. These children, they were about 4 years old. His children. The perfectly plated scallops lay forgotten. The roar of the party returned, but it was distant, muffled, as if coming from another world. In the sterile stainless steel heart of his mansion, Nathan Callahan's meticulously built empire was about to come crashing down around him. And at the center of the wreckage stood the ghost of his past with his 2 living, breathing secrets. The silence in the kitchen was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. It pressed in on Nathan, stealing the air from his lungs, louder than the frantic symphony of his own heartbeat. His gaze was locked on the 2 small children, who were now staring back at him with wide, curious eyes. His children. The words echoed in the cavern of his skull. Julia recovered first, her maternal instincts overriding her shock. She gently pushed the children, Noah and Grace, further behind her, a lioness shielding her cubs. "We're busy here," she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound firm. "My staff can answer any questions you have about the service." But Nathan's world had narrowed to this single stainless steel room. The party, Isabel, the billion-dollar deals. They were all phantoms. The only thing that was real was the woman before him and the undeniable proof of their shared past clinging to her legs. "My office now," he commanded. The voice was not that of a jilted lover, but of the CEO of Callahan Industries. It was cold, sharp, and accustomed to absolute obedience. He turned on his heel, not waiting for an answer. The implicit threat hanging in the air. He knew she would follow. She had to. Julia's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The nightmare she had run from for 5 years had finally caught up to her. She looked at her sous chef, a reliable woman named Maria. "Maria, please take over. See to the children for a few minutes. Don't let them out of your sight." Maria, sensing the seismic shift in the atmosphere, simply nodded, her eyes wide with concern as she gently led Noah and Grace toward a quiet corner with a promise of sweet treats. Julia wiped her sweating palms on her apron and followed the ghost out of her kitchen and into his world. She walked through the opulent halls of Callahan Manor, a place so far removed from her tiny two-bedroom apartment above her shop that it felt like another planet. She had read about this place, seen it in magazines. She had read about him, the boy she'd loved, now a titan of industry engaged to a woman who looked like she was born to rule it alongside him. Nathan led her into a vast dark wood-paneled study. A wall of glass offered the same breathtaking, brutal view of the Atlantic as the cliffs outside. He didn't turn on the main lights, leaving the room shrouded in shadows, illuminated only by the cold, distant glow of the moon on the water. He closed the heavy doors, and the sounds of the party vanished, leaving them in an insulated, volatile silence. He finally faced her, his face a mask of controlled fury. 5 years, Julia, 5 years of silence, and you show up here in my home on the night of my engagement. And you bring them. He couldn't bring himself to say the word children. It wasn't my choice to be here, she shot back, a spark of her old fire returning. Your assistant hired my company. I didn't know it was for you until I saw the address this morning. By then it was too late to back out of the contract. Convenient, he sneered, the word dripping with venom. You build a life, a family, and you never think to tell me. You just disappear, leaving me to believe. He stopped, his voice catching. What did you want me to believe, Julia? That everything we had was a lie. The raw pain in his voice sliced through her defenses. It was the same pain she had carried with her every single day for 5 years. A lie. I loved you, Nathan. I loved you more than anything. Then why? He roared, the sound exploding in the quiet room, the first crack in his iron composure. Why did you leave? One day you were in my arms, telling me you'd follow me anywhere, and the next you were gone. Your apartment was empty. Your phone was disconnected. You vanished from the face of the earth. Did you get a better offer? Tears pricked at Julia's eyes, hot and furious. A better offer? You think this was about money? What else was it about? He stalked towards her, his presence overwhelming in the small space. Was I not rich enough for you then? Was the struggling scholarship kid not a good enough bet? Did you think I'd fail? No, she cried, the word torn from her soul. I left because I had to protect you. Nathan laughed, a harsh, ugly sound devoid of humor. Protect me, from what? From your love? From the life we were going to build together? From him? She finally sobbed. The secret she had guarded for so long spilling out. From Gerald Vaughn, Nathan froze. The name hung in the air between them, a name synonymous with his success, his mentor, the man who had plucked him from obscurity and molded him into the titan he was today. Gerald Vaughn had been like a father to him. He had also died 2 years ago, solidifying his legacy as the benevolent architect of Nathan's rise. What are you talking about? Nathan's voice was dangerously low. What does Gerald have to do with this? Everything, Julia whispered, her body trembling. He came to see me a week before I left. He knew about us. He said I was a liability, a distraction, a girl from the slums who would drag you back down just as you were about to touch the sky. Nathan stared at her, his mind reeling, refusing to process her words. Gerald would never. He believed in me. He believed in his investment. Julia corrected, her voice gaining strength as the truth poured out. He showed me pictures, Nathan. Pictures of my father, my mother. He knew my father had a gambling problem. He knew my mother's health was fragile. He made it very clear that if I didn't disappear from your life, he would ruin them. He would make sure my father ended up in prison and that my mother's medical bills would bury them alive. He said he was doing it for you to save you from your own foolish heart. She looked him straight in the eye, her own filled with the unshed tears of 5 years of solitude. But that's not what made me leave. I would have fought him. I would have told you. But then he told me the final lie. He told me that this was what you wanted, that you had asked him to get rid of me. He said you were too kind, too weak to do it yourself. He said you knew you needed a different kind of woman to get to the top. And I wasn't it. The foundation of Nathan's world began to crack. The narrative he had built his life on, the story of a great love and an even greater betrayal, was turning to dust. He remembered that time. He had been on the cusp of his first major deal, the one that had launched him. Gerald had been coaching him relentlessly, telling him to shed all weaknesses. He'd thought he meant his temper, his impatience. Had he meant Julia? I didn't believe him, Julia continued, her voice barely a whisper. Not at first, but then he showed me a signed document, a severance agreement for a personal assistant with my name on it and a bank transfer of $50,000 that would be deposited into my account the moment I was on a bus out of the city. He said it was your way of saying thank you and goodbye. Nathan's blood ran cold. He remembered that document. Gerald had told him it was for a disgruntled employee he was letting go, a routine matter. He'd been buried in work, stressed, and had signed it without a second thought, trusting his mentor completely. The $50,000, it had been a rounding error in the deal he was closing. He saw it all then, the sickening, brilliant cruelty of the plan. Gerald hadn't just threatened her. He had poisoned their love at its root, making her believe the man who adored her had discarded her like a piece of trash. Before he could speak, before he could bridge the chasm of lies that had separated them for half a decade, the study doors opened. Isabel stood there, a vision in shimmering gold. Her perfectly sculpted face a mask of polite inquiry that didn't quite hide the flinty suspicion in her eyes. "Darling," she said, her voice like ice, "is everything all right? Your guests are waiting. We are waiting. You were supposed to make an announcement." Her gaze flickered from Nathan's pale, stricken face to the tear-streaked face of the woman in the chef's uniform. She didn't need to know the details to recognize a threat when she saw one. The air in the room crackled. A new storm gathering before the old one had even broken. Nathan was trapped between two worlds. In front of him stood his past, resurrected and infinitely more complex than he had ever imagined. And behind him stood his future, cold, glittering, and demanding. And in the kitchen, two small children with his eyes were waiting for their mother. The choice was no longer about a simple announcement. It was about which lie he would continue to live and which truth he was willing to fight for. The second stretched into an eternity. Isabel's perfectly arched eyebrow rose a fraction of a millimeter. A silent question that demanded an immediate answer. Julia, flinching under the cold scrutiny, wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, a gesture of such raw vulnerability that it made Nathan's chest ache. "This is Julia," Nathan said, his voice strained. A poor attempt to stitch together the torn fabric of the evening. "The chef I was telling you about. I was just complimenting her on the magnificent menu." Isabel's eyes, the color of expensive cognac, swept over Julia dismissively. "I see," she said, the words clipped. She didn't believe him for a second. "Well, your compliments can wait. The chairman of the board of Omnip, Mr. Harrison, is asking for you. It would be rude to keep him waiting any longer." She held out her hand to Nathan, a regal gesture that was both an invitation and a command. It was an out, a chance to retreat to the familiar glittering world he knew. He could take Isabel's hand, return to the party, make his announcement, and deal with the emotional wreckage in this room later. He could pretend for a few more hours that his life was still the perfect construct he had designed. But as he looked at Julia, who was already starting to back away towards the door, ready to retreat into the shadows once more, something inside him snapped. The 5 years of bitterness, the carefully constructed walls around his heart, the very foundation of the man he had become, it was all based on a lie. A lie told by the man he had trusted most. He ignored Isabel's outstretched hand. "Go on ahead, Isabel," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Tell Mr. Harrison I've been unavoidably detained. I'll be out in a moment. The shock on Isabel's face was exquisite. She was a woman who was never ever dismissed. Her lips thinned into a hard line. Nathan, don't be absurd. I'm not being absurd, he replied, his gaze never leaving Julia. Go. For a horrifying moment, a public scene seemed imminent. But Isabel Morrow was a master of strategy. She knew a losing battle when she saw one. With a final venomous glare at Julia, she turned with a swirl of golden fabric and swept out of the room, leaving a chill in her wake. The heavy doors clicked shut once again, sealing Nathan and Julia in their private crucible. You shouldn't have done that, Julia whispered, her voice trembling. She's your fiancée, is she? Nathan asked, the question directed more at himself than at her. He ran a hand through his hair, the perfect coif coming undone. The CEO was gone, replaced by a man lost at sea. Julia, what he did, what Gerald did. I never knew. You have to believe me. I do, she said softly. And the simple affirmation was like a balm on a wound he hadn't known was festering. I see it in your face. I didn't believe it then. Not really. I think I knew you. The real you. Couldn't be that cruel. But I was 21, pregnant, and terrified. His lies were easier to believe than the truth. That the man who was supposed to be your mentor was a monster. Pregnant? The word landed with the force of a physical blow. You knew when you left. You already knew you were pregnant. She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. I found out the day before Gerald came to see me. I was going to tell you that night. It was going to be our celebration. The phantom pain in his chest intensified. He remembered that night. He had waited for her. A ring box in his pocket, a cheap silver band he'd bought with the last of his money. When she never showed, he'd thrown it into the river, cursing her name. He hadn't just lost his love that night. He had lost his family. Noah and Grace, he said, the names feeling foreign and yet profoundly familiar on his tongue. They're their twins. A faint, sad smile touched Julia's lips for the first time. A surprise just like their father, always going above and beyond. She hugged herself. A protective gesture. They're good kids, Nathan. Happy. They think their dad was a soldier who died a hero. It was easier than telling them their father didn't want them. Each word was another twist of the knife. He, Nathan Callahan, a man who controlled every facet of his life, had been a helpless puppet, and the cost of that manipulation was 5 years of his children's lives. He took a step closer, his hands clenched at his sides, fighting the overwhelming urge to pull her into his arms, to erase the years of pain with a single touch. But he had no right. Where did you go? He asked, his voice. A small town a few states away. I used the $50,000, the money I hated but desperately needed, to rent a tiny apartment and get on my feet. I worked 2 jobs, saved every penny. When the twins were old enough for preschool, I enrolled in culinary school at night. It was the one thing that was always mine, my passion. It saved me. Her voice was filled with a quiet pride that he couldn't help but admire. She hadn't just survived. She had built a life, a business from the ashes of the one he was supposed to have given her. His mind, always working, always strategizing, began to spin. This wasn't just a personal catastrophe. It was a crisis that needed to be managed. But the old cold calculus was failing him. The variables were no longer stock prices and market shares. They were bedtime stories and scraped knees. I need to see them, he said. The need of physical ache. I need to talk to them. Julia's protective walls went up instantly. No, not like this. They're confused enough as it is. You are a stranger, Nathan, and this world. She gestured around the opulent study is not theirs. I've protected them from this, from the complications, the pressures. I won't have them thrown into the middle of your drama." He knew she was right, but the logic warred with the primal, desperate need to connect with the two small beings who carried his blood. Before he could argue, his phone buzzed. It was his head of security, a man named Sam Ortega. Nathan ignored it. It buzzed again insistently. With a curse, he answered it. "What is it, Sam?" "I'm busy, sir." Sam's voice was tense. "You might want to come to the security office. We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" There was a brief pause. "It's about your fiancée, sir, and the catering staff." A cold dread washed over Nathan. He looked at Julia, whose face had gone pale. "What has she done?" he asked, his voice grim. "Miss Morrow just had 2 of my men escort the caterer's children out a side entrance and into a car. Sir, her father, Mr. Edward Morrow, is on the phone with her. The instructions were to take care of the problem." The floor fell away. The game had changed. This was no longer about a buried past or a broken heart. Isabel and her ruthless father had made their move, and their targets were his children. The love, the pain, the confusion, it all coalesced into a single clarifying emotion. Rage, a cold, lethal fury he hadn't felt in years. He was no longer the boy who had lost everything. He was Nathan Callahan, a man who had built an empire, a man who destroyed whatever stood in his way. And Isabel Morrow had just made the fatal mistake of standing between him and his children. "Julia, come with me," he said, his voice deadly calm. He grabbed her hand, his touch firm and reassuring. "The party's over." The walk to the security office was a blur of gilded wallpaper and antique portraits whose painted eyes seemed to follow them with silent judgment. Nathan moved with a predatory grace, pulling Julia along in his wake. The low thrum of the party faded behind them, replaced by the frantic beating of Julia's heart. Panic, cold and sharp, was beginning to set in. Her children, her babies, in a car with strange men taken on the orders of a woman whose eyes held all the warmth of a glacier. They burst into the security office, a sleek, sterile room lined with monitors displaying feeds from every corner of the estate. Sam Ortega, a burly ex-military man with a face like a clenched fist, stood at attention. "Status," Nathan barked, his eyes scanning the screens. "Black SUV heading north on the coastal highway," Sam reported, pointing to a monitor tracking a set of taillights on a dark road. "My man is tailing them, staying out of sight. Ms. Morrow is still in the Grand Hall, acting as if nothing has happened. Her father is on his way here, her father." Nathan's jaw tightened. Edward Morrow was a man known for his ruthlessness, a corporate shark who ate competitors for breakfast. If he was involved, this was far more than a spiteful act from a jealous fiancé. "What do they want? What do they mean take care of the problem?" Julia's voice was a choked whisper, her knuckles white where she gripped Nathan's arm. Nathan's mind raced, connecting the dots with terrifying speed. Isabel saw the children as a threat to their engagement, a complication that could derail the multi-billion-dollar merger between Callahan Industries and Morrow Global. And Edward Morrow did not tolerate complications. Taking care of them could mean anything from sending them away to something far, far worse. "They won't hurt them," Nathan said, trying to reassure her, though his own blood ran cold. "They are leverage. That's how men like Edward operate. He'll use them to make sure I go through with the wedding and the merger." He turned to Sam. "Get me Edward on the phone now. And get a chopper ready. I want eyes in the sky on that vehicle." He looked at another guard. "Find Isabel. Keep her here. Don't let her leave the grounds." As Sam worked the phones, Nathan pulled Julia aside. He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me, Julia. I will get them back. I swear to you on my life, nothing will happen to them." In his eyes, she no longer saw the cold billionaire or the wounded lover. She saw the fierce, protective boy she had fallen in love with, the boy who had once fought off 3 muggers to protect her. She saw the father of her children, and for the first time in 5 years, she wasn't alone in her fear. She nodded, a fragile thread of trust weaving itself between them. The speakerphone on the desk crackled to life. Callahan, a heavily accented voice, smooth as silk and cold as steel, purred through the speaker. "I hear there is some commotion at your little party." "Cut the crap, Morrow," Nathan snarled. "Where are my children?" There was a soft chuckle on the other end. "Your children? I was under the impression you had no children. That is certainly what the paperwork for our merger indicates. It would be unfortunate if new information were to come to light that might complicate such a profitable arrangement." "You will not use them as bargaining chips," Nathan said, his voice dangerously low. "I am a businessman, Nathan, just like you," Edward replied calmly. "Everything is a negotiation. You have something I want. Your signature on a contract that will make us both wealthier than kings. And it seems I now have something you want. The children are perfectly safe for now. They are being taken to a comfortable location where they will wait. All you have to do is what you were always going to do. Reassure my daughter. Make your announcement. And we can all forget this unfortunate distraction. And if I don't," the silence stretched. "Then the distraction will be permanently removed," Edward said. "All pretense of civility gone. Do not test me, boy. I have buried bigger threats than a backstreet caterer and her bastard offspring." Julia let out a strangled sob. The casual cruelty of his words, the dismissal of her children's lives as a mere inconvenience, was monstrous. Rage, pure and undiluted, surged through Nathan. The empire he had built, the power he had amassed. It was all worthless if he couldn't protect his own family. In that moment, the choice became blindingly clear. He had been chasing ghosts, building a monument on a foundation of lies. No more. The deal is off. "Morrow," Nathan said, his voice ringing with absolute finality. "What did you say?" Edward's voice sharpened. "You heard me. The merger is dead, and you have made the fatal mistake of declaring war on me. You have 5 minutes to have that car turn around and bring my children back here. If they are not on this property unharmed in 30 minutes, I will unleash the full force of my resources on you and your pathetic company. I will expose every dirty deal, every backroom bribe, every skeleton in your closet. By the time I'm done, Morrow Global will be a footnote in a textbook on corporate suicide. 5 minutes." He slammed the phone down, cutting off Edward's furious sputtering. The room was silent, save for Julia's ragged breaths. "Sam," Nathan ordered, his mind a whirlwind of strategy. "Contact my legal team. Tell them to start digging. I want everything on Morrow. Contact the press. My press, the ones on my payroll. I want them ready. And get me a location on that car now." Suddenly, one of the security men pointed at a monitor. "Sir, the car is stopped." All eyes snapped to the screen. The black SUV was pulled over on the side of the dark, empty highway. Sam's tail car had parked a safe distance behind it. For a tense minute, nothing happened. Then the door of the SUV opened. A man got out, opened the back door, and gently lifted out a sleeping Noah, followed by Grace, who was rubbing her eyes. He carried them over to the guardrail and set them down gently. Then he got back in the car and it sped off into the night, leaving the 2 small children standing alone on the shoulder of a deserted highway. "No!" Julia screamed, her hands flying to her mouth. It was a message. A cruel, vicious warning from Edward. He hadn't hurt them, not physically. He had simply discarded them, proving how little they meant to him and how far he was willing to go. "Go!" Nathan roared at Sam's man through the comms. "Get the kids." They watched, hearts in their throats, as the headlights of the tail car illuminated the 2 small, lonely figures. The car pulled up, A man jumped out, and in seconds, Noah and Grace were safely inside. But Nathan knew this was far from over. Edward had shown his hand. This wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. He had threatened the only thing that now mattered to Nathan. He turned to Julia, who was sobbing with relief. He gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "I'm going to end this," he said, his voice soft but laced with steel. He walked to the intercom that connected to the main house. "Sam, patch me through to the Grand Hall sound system." "Sir." "Do it." There was a click, then the faint sound of music and chatter. Nathan took a deep breath. He was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of his own life. "May I have your attention, please?" His voice boomed through the Grand Hall, silencing the orchestra and the hum of conversation. "This is Nathan Callahan. I apologize for the interruption and for my absence. I had a matter of some importance to attend to. There will be no engagement announcement tonight. My engagement to Isabel Morrow is over." A collective gasp swept through the hall, audible even over the intercom. "The merger between Callahan Industries and Morrow Global is also terminated. It has come to my attention that the Morrow family operates with a code of ethics I cannot and will not condone. I have also been living under a misconception for many years. 5 years ago, I lost the love of my life due to the lies and manipulations of others. Tonight, I found her again, and I also found the 2 children I never knew I had." He paused, letting the bombshells land. "My personal life is my own. But when it is used as a weapon against me, and when my children's safety is threatened, it becomes a matter of public record. The party is over. I would ask you all to please leave. Thank you." He cut the connection. The silence in the security room was profound. He had just set fire to his own world. He had made an enemy of one of the most powerful men in the world and scandalized the society he had worked so hard to conquer. He looked at Julia, whose eyes were wide with a mixture of terror and awe. He had just thrown away a billion-dollar deal and a society fiancé for her and for children he had only just met. He felt a strange sense of peace descend upon him. The gilded cage he had built for himself had been suffocating him. Now he was finally free. The fight was just beginning. But for the first time in 5 years, Nathan Callahan knew exactly what he was fighting for. The ensuing chaos was biblical. The grand hall of Callahan Manor erupted into a maelstrom of frantic whispers, ringing cell phones, and the hurried exit of the crème de la crème of society, all eager to spread the most explosive scandal of the decade. Isabel, her face a kabuki mask of fury and humiliation, was last seen being practically carried to her limousine by her father's security. Her shrill threats lost in the roar of the engine, but in the quiet heart of the storm, in the security office. A new world was being born. Moments after Nathan's pronouncement, the door opened and Sam's man walked in carrying a sleeping Noah while a tearful Grace clung to his leg. "Mommy!" Grace cried, running into Julia's outstretched arms. Julia sank to her knees, clutching both children, burying her face in their hair, murmuring their names over and over as if they were a prayer. She checked them from head to toe, her hands shaking, assuring herself they were real and unharmed. Nathan stood back, an outsider looking in on a perfect, complete circle of love. A profound hollow ache echoed in his chest. He had saved them, but he was still a stranger. He had no place in that circle. Noah, awakened by the commotion, blinked his sleepy Seedorm eyes and looked from his mother's tear-streaked face to the tall, imposing man standing by the wall of monitors. "Are you the man who was going to eat all the shrimp?" he asked, his voice small. A wet, choked laugh escaped Julia. She looked up at Nathan, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Noah, Grace, this is Nathan. He's a friend." Nathan knelt slowly, cautiously, as one might approach a fawn. He was now at their level. The billionaire titan gone, replaced by a man completely out of his depth. "Hello, Noah, Grace," he said, his voice softer than he thought possible. "I'm sorry you were scared. That was my fault. And I promise you, I will never let anyone frighten you like that again." Grace peeked at him from the safety of her mother's embrace. "You have a loud voice," she declared. Nathan managed a small smile. "I do. I'll try to use my inside voice around you." The days that followed were a blur of damage control and quiet discovery. Nathan's lawyers and PR team worked around the clock, battling the fallout from the broken engagement and torpedoed merger. Edward Morrow, true to form, launched a vicious media campaign, painting Nathan as unstable and untrustworthy. Stocks fluctuated wildly. But Nathan, for the first time, found he didn't care about the market's opinion. He was focused on a much smaller, more volatile, and infinitely more precious world. He insisted Julia and the children stay at the manor, arguing it was the only place he could guarantee their safety. After much hesitation, Julia agreed, moving into a guest wing that was larger than her entire apartment. It was a strange, suspended reality. They lived in the same house but occupied different universes. During the day, Nathan was a general waging war in the corporate world from his study. Julia tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for the children, playing with them in the vast manicured gardens or baking cookies in the kitchen that was once her workplace. The nights were the hardest. The huge house would fall silent, and the ghosts of the past 5 years would roam the halls. More than once, Nathan found himself standing outside the guest wing, listening to the faint sound of Julia singing a lullaby, a melody he'd never heard to children he barely knew. He started to make small overtures. He'd leave his study when he heard them in the garden, watching from a distance as Noah tried to teach Grace how to kick a ball. One afternoon, he found a meticulously built multi-story Lego castle on the floor of the library. Later, his security chief showed him footage of Noah and Grace chattering away as they constructed their masterpiece. That evening, he spent 2 hours online ordering every Lego set ever made. Slowly, tentatively, the walls began to come down. Julia started bringing him a cup of coffee in the mornings. He started joining them for dinner, sitting at the head of a cavernous dining table, listening as Grace recounted her day, and Noah asked a million questions about the giant model ship in a glass case. "Did you ever go on a real pirate ship?" Noah asked one evening, his eyes wide. "No, not a real pirate ship," Nathan said. "But I have sailed on some very big boats. Maybe one day I can take you. And Mommy too," Grace added. Nathan's gaze met Julia's across the table. In her eyes he saw the flicker of 100 shared memories of a tiny leaky boat they had once rented for a day, of a promise they had made to sail around the world together. "Yes," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Mommy too." The war with Edward Morrow reached its peak a month later. Nathan, using the information his team had dug up, systematically dismantled his rival's reputation, leaking proof of illegal trading and corporate malfeasance to the press. Cornered and facing ruin, Edward finally capitulated. The threat stopped. The media war ended. That night, Nathan found Julia on one of the terraces, looking out at the calm, moonlit sea. "It's over," he said, standing beside her. "He won't bother you again." "Thank you," she said softly. They stood in comfortable silence for a long time. The anger and betrayal that had defined their reunion had been washed away by the quick tide of shared crisis and tentative new beginnings. All that was left was the truth. "I had a ring for you that night," Nathan confessed, his voice barely a whisper against the sound of the waves. "The night you left, I was going to ask you to marry me." Julia turned to him, her eyes glistening in the moonlight. "I would have said yes." He finally reached for her, his hand gently cupping her face. It was a touch he had dreamed of for 125 nights. She leaned into his palm, her eyes fluttering shut. All the pain, all the lost years, All the heartache seemed to melt away in that one simple connection. "I know this is all new," he said, his voice raw. "And I have no right to ask anything of you. You've built a life without me. But Julia, I don't want to build one without you ever again. Let me be a father to our children. Let me try. Let us try to find our way back." She opened her eyes, and in their emerald depths, he saw not the weary chef or the terrified mother, but the girl he had loved, the woman she had become, strong, resilient, and finally home. "Okay, Nathan," she whispered, a tear of joy slipping down her cheek. "Let's try." He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't the desperate, hungry kiss of their youth. It was a kiss of homecoming, a kiss that held the sorrow of the past and the fragile, brilliant hope of a future. It was not a perfect ending written in the stars, but a messy, complicated, and beautiful beginning forged in the heart of the storm. And for the first time, the billionaire who had everything finally had everything that mattered. So what is true wealth? Is it the towering skyscrapers and the billion-dollar bank accounts? Or is it the sound of your children's laughter in a home filled with love? Nathan Callahan had it all, but he had to lose it to understand what was truly priceless. His journey reminds us that sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones we thought we had lost forever. And that second chances aren't just for storybooks. It's a reminder that the past can't be erased, but the future is always unwritten. If this story of love, betrayal, and redemption touched your heart, please give this video a like and share it with someone who loves a story about fighting for family. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter in our collection of real-life drama. Thank you for watching.